Hey, fourth graders. So this week in garden, what we're going to do is we are going to talk a little bit about the Lewis and Clark end of the expedition, okay, when they reached the Pacific. And then we are going to get to do some planting. And so you guys are going to think about if you were having to overwinter in Oregon, right, or anywhere, and you didn't have the resources, okay, that we have now, what would you have to do? You would have to find seeds to plant. Right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about winter at Camp Clatsop, okay? And then we're going to also talk a little bit about the end of the expedition, what Lewis and Clark found in Oregon and some of the experiences that they had. And then we're going to get to use our seed planting discs from our garden kit, okay? And if you don't have this, that's totally fine. But you are going to be a scavenger. You're going to have to go out and be resourceful and find a seed you think you can grow. Okay? This is how people have done botany and gardening for hundreds of years before we could go to the nursery and just buy a pack of seeds. So you're going to challenge yourself and you're going to see if you can get a seed that you find in nature to germinate. All right? So without further ado, what you're going to do is we're going to get out this worksheet, okay? Winter at Camp Clatsop. We are going to talk a little bit about the end of the expedition with Lewis and Clark when they found the Pacific, okay? And then we're going to go ahead and get our seed pellets out if you have them. If you don't have them, you can use this little thing from your garden kit, this little container. You can go out and put a little dirt in it. That's totally fine too, okay? If you'd like to right now, you can go ahead and start soaking your seed pellet. What you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to stick it in a bowl full of warm water. And you can see it's nice and not very high, right? Short. What happens when you stick it in water is it's going to expand. So it goes from this to this. And then it's ready to plant the seed. You're going to leave this paper netting on the outside. Okay, this helps keep the dirt together. Once you plant it, you can stick the whole thing in the ground. The roots will grow out of this. Not a problem. Okay, and you'll see there's a little hole in the top. This is where you put the seed. And then you just kind of cover it up by squeezing it. Okay, so you can go ahead and start soaking this now in some warm water. And then when we come back, it will be ready to go and you can find a seed to plant. All right, so we're going to go ahead and switch to our document camera and we are going to talk a little bit about the end of the Lewis and Clark. Okay, so this is out of the How We Crossed the West, The Adventures of Lewis and Clark, which takes a lot of the journal entries from the expedition, okay, and add some graphics to them, and it's just a high level, nice way to get an impression of exactly what they were seeing. And so you can see this is when they went onward to Oregon. So Oregon's just south of Washington, the state that we live in, okay. October 1805 says, I went on shore and found the Indians much frightened in their lodges. They thought we were not men, but birds that fell from the clouds. As soon as they saw Sacagawea, they understood our friendly intentions, as no woman ever accompanies a war party. Another entry, the river widens and becomes a beautiful, gentle stream about 1.5 miles wide. Great numbers of harbor seals about. This is another one. The fleas are very troublesome, and our men can't get rid of them. They strip off their clothes and kill the fleas, during which time they remain naked. Okay, so think about all the little pests that we take for granted we don't have, but they were dealing with when they were on their expedition. Salmon trout, which we had fried in a little bear's oil. I thought one of the most delicious fish I have ever tasted. The Chinook Indians flatten the heads of the female children and of many male children also. Heads of many infants are 2 inches thick on the forehead and thinner still higher. Chillicotwa canoes ride the highest waves. They are very light, and heads of animals are carved on the raised bows. High cliff of rocks. I saw one of the mountain goats. It had thick wool and long, coarse hair on the back, resembling bristles. Right, so remember, they're seeing all sorts of plants and animals that most people had not seen yet, most white men. A chief opened his medicine bag and showed me 14 fingers, which he said were the fingers of different enemies taken in war. Slept very little last night. The swans, geese, brants, kind of goose, were immensely numerous, and their noise horrid. So if you've ever heard the geese honking as they fly, right? So sometimes it was definitely, they're not in a house to shelter out some of those noises. And it says, closer and closer to the Pacific, November 7th in 1805, we were encamped under a hill when the morning fog cleared off. Ocean in view. Oh, the joy! This great Pacific Ocean, which we had been so long anxious to see, and the roaring noise made by waves breaking on rocky shores may be heard distinctly. The seas rolled and tossed the canoes in such a manner that several of our party were seasick. 5 Indians came down in a canoe with fish to sell. One had on a sailor's jacket and pantaloons he got from white people. 11 days of rain and most disagreeable. Cannot get out to hunt, return to a better position, or proceed on. Immense swells from the main ocean immediately in front of us. All the men who wish to see the main ocean prepare themselves to set out early morning tomorrow. November 18th, 1805. Our goal is reached at last. We behold with astonishment the waves dashing against the rocks and this immense ocean. So then in their return journey, Lewis and Clark wintered near the Pacific Ocean and left home on March 23rd, 1806. Indian friends pointed out a fast route through the mountains, and the party split into 2 groups for a while to explore the Marias and Yellowstone rivers. Many adventures followed. Lewis and 3 of his party battled 8 Blackfeet Indians who were trying to steal their guns and horses. One-eyed Cruzette mistook Lewis for an elk and shot him in the breeches or pants. The Mandan chief, Big White, joined the explorers to visit President Jefferson, and finally, nearing home, the men discovered that they had been given up for dead long ago. On Sunday, September 21st, 1806, in the village of St. Charles near St. Louis, the jubilant explorers were greeted by cheering crowds. They had been gone for more than 2 years and 4 months. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get out our winter at Fort Clatsop. Okay, so Lewis and Clark have decided that they must overwinter and camp in Oregon. Following the advice of the local Clatsop tribe of Native Americans, they set up camp south of the Columbia River. The local Clatsop tribe has spoken about the abundant elk in the area, but you will also need to plant some food to ensure the best odds of surviving the winter. The expedition has asked you to plant a crop in the soil near camp. Unfortunately, the soil isn't ideal. Using the soil in your garden kit, okay, you're just going to go find some or use your seed starter. Try and amend it to make the best chance of your seed germinating. You have 3 seeds to choose from, all with different germination times and success rates. So you're going to go find some different seeds out in nature. That's going to be the challenge. And then you're going to say the crop that you have decided to plant. Okay, if you found some seeds off a tree, hey, maybe you know it's a maple tree, all right? And you're going to write it down. You're going to figure out the reason that I chose this crop. And if you've changed the soil, maybe you feel really great in a soccer game after you drink some Gatorade, and you think that seed might benefit from some Gatorade, or that seed might benefit from some really bright sunshine, or might benefit from, who's to say, whatever you want to do, okay? You are going to write down here if you amend that seed at all. Okay, so it's important to remember that the Corps of Discovery, right, Lewis and Clark, they reached the Pacific Ocean in 1805 in November. And that was in, basically, it's wintertime here. Think about Seattle in November. It starts getting cold, right? That's when you're bundling up. You really, if you're venturing back out there, for some people that ski, right, the slopes are starting to get snow, they couldn't journey home in November of 1805. So in early December, William Clark recorded that Meriwether Lewis had found a suitable location for their winter quarters with elk that was sufficient to winter on. So basically, it had enough elk for them to eat. So they went ahead and built Fort Clatsop, which measured just 50 feet square. That is not very big. Okay, it is a small encampment, and it housed 32 men, 1 woman, a baby, and a dog. All right. And another thing when they were overwintering at Fort Clatsop, okay, and something to think about as you're thinking about what types of seeds. Right now, it's beautiful spring weather, but when they were overwintering at camp, from the 4th of November, 1805 to the 25th of March, 1806, it says there were not more than 12 days in which it did not rain. And of these, but 6 were clear. So it was definitely a very wet and yucky winter. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to head on outside. You're going to find a crop. If you have seeds at home and you really want to grow a corn, okay, maybe you want to do a corn start, go ahead and do that. So maybe I'm going to do a corn start. Okay, so I'm going to try to grow corn. The reason I chose this crop is because, well, corn, it can give us food, right? The way that I've changed the soil. So now this is the interesting part. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this seed pellet, right? And maybe I added some extra soil to it. Maybe I think this isn't quite good enough. Maybe I added some Gatorade when I watered it. Who's to say? It can be up to you as far as what you want to do to help increase the chances that your little seed's going to germinate. Okay? I'm going to say I added extra local soil, which just means I went out my back door and I patted it in with the seed start, okay? And placed in sun. There we go. Okay, and then that's it. So then you're going to see how long it takes for your seed to germinate. All right, and just think about, this is a picture, this is an artist rendering of Fort Clatsop. Think about at Fort Clatsop, what those people, they had to trade, right? There was a lot of dehydrated fish. They went ahead and made salt pits so that they could take the seawater, and once the water evaporated, it would leave salt behind that they could salt the fish and salt different foods. They ate a lot of root vegetables, so root vegetables would be things like carrots, okay, that they helped trade for. So if you want to try to plant a carrot seed, again, carrot with this might be hard because it's the root and it's going to be growing down, and this, it should be able to kind of grow through this, but it's just one more challenge. Right? If you're growing a carrot, maybe you cut this bottom out so the carrot can grow down. Okay? And you can write that there. But you guys are going to go ahead and figure out what you want to plant for your winter at Fort Clatsop. All right, fourth graders, so now you have your item that you've planted, your seed, okay, whether it's maybe corn and you happen to have some seeds lying around the house, maybe you went out in nature and found one, awesome, okay. You're going to go ahead and pick out why you picked that item to plant, okay, and write it down. And then if you made any changes, right, did you change the soil? Did you add a special little something to the water that you gave it? Okay, you're going to write that one down too. And you're going to see if you can get your seed to germinate, okay? And I want you to be thinking about some of the challenges that Lewis and Clark faced on their journey, because it was definitely, even when they attained their goal, they were still a long ways from home. They were only halfway there when they hit their goal, right? Once they hit the ocean, they still had to turn around and go all the way back. And as you said, like as we read, right, it was still dealing with other tribes. It was still accidentally figuring out thinking somebody was an elk when they weren't and shooting them. All sorts of pitfalls on this expedition. Okay, and so as you're thinking about what you can get to germinate, this is a very small challenge compared to what the Discovery Corps was actually dealing with on their journey. So it's a good thing to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, right? As we think we have a lot of things that are come pretty easy to us, even in gardening, that sometimes it doesn't turn out exactly as we think, but really we have a lot of help, and a lot of people did not used to have that help. All right, you guys, I will see you next week. Have a great time figuring out what to plant.